Welcome to Leadr Podcast, the ultimate destination for Medtech insights, leadership inspiration, and the latest innovations. I'm Stephanie Plea, founder of Tribe Agency and your host for Leadr Podcast. Welcome to episode 6 of Leadr Podcast. I just had the pleasure of speaking to a former colleague of mine and now CEO of DataBiologics, Leah Braddell. Leah is a biomedical engineer with a rich history in market access and healthcare strategies from leading medtech companies. Leah's journey to becoming a CEO in a field where less than 2% of startup CEOs are women is both inspiring and enlightening. We talk about things like imposter syndrome and various books that motivated Leah to her journey to CEO. So get ready for an insightful conversation and let's dive into the episode. We've been talking since I started Tribe over a year ago, and we share a lot of commonality on how we approach our lives. And so I've always wanted to have Leah Braddell on, but the timing just wasn't great for either of us as we're trying to launch companies. And here we are a year later, and we get to have a call today. We had a few technical difficulties lining up today on our technical stuff, but we are here. We are on Zoom today and not Riverside, but we've got this covered. That's right. So first of all, thank you again for joining. And I know you have plenty to do today, and we'll try to keep this short, sweet, and fun. For all those that are listening, it's going to be a good one. Okay, so origin story is what we wanted to talk about first. And I think it's interesting because Leah and I both worked at Intuitive, which was both of our former employer. I was there for over a decade. How long were you at Intuitive?
I was there almost 13 years.
So were you there longer than me?
I joined in 2009. So I don't know when did you come on?
I did not know that. Okay. So I learn something new every time I do a podcast.
So I was like the youngest
You're like the OG.
CSR they ever hired.
What were you, like 5? I mean,
I was 26 at the time, 26. And honestly, the only reason I think I got the job, so it was the very first person they were ever putting in the city of Las Vegas, so covering from that market.
You were the Vegas rep.
I was the Vegas rep, and I had knocked on the door. I'm like, oh yes, I could sell this robot. That sounds great. And it took me 3 months just to get an interview, and they're like, I don't know. And I remember getting dinged in the interview process. So like, well, you didn't really ask us like what we were looking for and what, why we haven't been able to find someone. I was like, well, I know why. It's me and the guy with the face tattoo. Like you're not really getting, I know the pool of candidates here.
Wait, what? You replaced someone that had a face tattoo?
No, I just knew they were trying to recruit in that market
in Vegas.
At that time. Yeah, the medical community there is, and I mean now it's like a booming medical community, but at the time, most of the big companies were covering that market from San Diego or Phoenix or Salt Lake, and so it was give me a chance.
I remember reading one of your blogs. There was a couple blogs, but I remember reading one. And I was like, that is freaking awesome. I mean, you were so well-spoken. And I try not to give praise when it's not deserved. And it's just not my personality. I think you probably know that much about me at this point. And I think I called you or texted you immediately. I'm like, are you like a writer? Like, what? How did you... And this is, we were laughing about it in our pre-call. This is before AI. So I know AI didn't write it for you, but I was like, that is really well written. Like you wrote it like a writer, it was thoughtful, and it just kind of had this like energy in it where it felt like you had a background in writing. And there's a unique art there that, most people, it's kind of like picking up singing. Not everyone can sing. Not everyone can write. They can all write through AI, or they can write through like a marketing intent, but like capturing people's heart and emotion in your writing is a totally different craft. And that was like the immediate like onboarding for Leah in my life. Like I was like, I need to know what this is about. This is too interesting for me. So I think I reached out. I can't remember the rest of that story.
I think you did, because there was a few people that, so the intent actually with that. So that time in my life, I was really trying to figure out, like, I had just been so into the job. I loved it. I loved everything about robotic surgery and everything that we did at Intuitive. It was just really a great, great experience. but I also felt like, okay, there's more to me than just this job. And, I had at that time hired an executive coach, and she was really trying to help me figure out, really the light bulb was, are you living in your zone of excellence or are you living in your zone of genius? And I was very comfortable in my zone of excellence, with a ton of fear for making any kind of change. And she encouraged me. So I do have a background in writing, but I don't. I've just always been one that writes. I journal, I write. I was the editor of my high school yearbook.
Of course
and I
you
wrote,
were. Of course you were.
Those kind of things. And then I spent years in, my background in my undergraduate is as an engineer. I was a biomedical engineer. I was in a PhD program. I did a lot of clinical, technical writing, but I hadn't really put anything out into the world that was necessarily like meaningful or representative of me. So I actually had entered a writing contest. Those blogs that you wrote or read were
part of a contest?
Part of a contest.
Well, that's why they were so good. I mean, and you didn't have a ghostwriter? You didn't have anyone helping you?
No, this contest was here's the topic. And it's funny, the one that I think you're talking about, the topic was space. And I really took it as like, it was kind of representing like the journey I was going through in recognizing my ability to lead and what that really means. Like, why am at the time I was so afraid to just go out and do my own thing. I had all of these like, oh no, who am I to do that? And how could I possibly do that? And now that you brought this up, because I really hadn't even thought about it, the funny thing is that was in the title of that article was Leadr. It was about being a leader. And the last line in that article was, I hope I find my tribe.
Oh, full circle moment.
I know. I was like, how funny is this? That's like your company and then everything that I've seen that you guys are doing, that I'm so excited to have you be part of our journeys, specifically with our company. So I think that's something I definitely have, part of my like, big plan is I will eventually write a book. And the fun thing about being in the position I'm in now, and really what we're trying to do is bring to light the evidence and this emerging field in regenerative medicine. And I call it like being out on the frontier, and I'm a reporter on the frontier of medicine.
All right. Well, before you get into data biologics, because I definitely want to give it its due time, but I want to talk about like bridge the gap between like attending writing contests and blogging for fun. And by the way, I've heard tons of people say zone of genius, but I've never heard the differentiation between working in your zone of excellence versus zone of genius. And that is brilliant.
The zone of excellence versus zone of genius, that actually comes from an author, Hendricks, a book called The Big Leap. And one of the first books I read in this like journey of things. And he really talks, there's other zones too. There's like zones of incompetence, like just don't do that. That's not your thing. And then there's zones of competence, and you get all the way up to this zone of genius. And usually like what stops you from making that leap. So if you are a person who performs in a zone of excellence, you are very comfortable. You're usually pretty well compensated. You're praised for your work. You're comfortable, and there's nothing wrong with staying there.
It's kind of easy and fun to be in your excellence.
Totally. There's nothing wrong with that. But for somebody like me, who I know that there's something bigger I'm supposed to be doing. And what my coach at the time had really helped me understand is, you're not going to do that in corporate America. You are going to have to do that like the hard way and go and do something on your own and do something hard. And so this concept also touches on how your internal dialogue and the fears, and how things might be going swimmingly well. Great. And then all of a sudden you get sick, you stub your toe on the table, something like happens that sort of derails it. Or you start having thoughts of like, but at the time my thought was, but my family's going to be like destitute on the street.
Yes.
if I leave this, how can I do this?
Yes.
And but we realize that that is just what's called an upper limit. So that the concept of this like evolution is recognizing when you're having upper limit thinking, and it's all an illusion. It's just fear trying to keep you where you are instead of allowing you to go forward. And if you let go of it, if you just look at that fear as an observer, you find that it really goes away, and that your fear doesn't ever materialize once you let it go. So that's an everyday struggle and journey for me is is this an upper limit thought, or is this something I actually should be concerned with?
And here
that
you
was
are.
an impactful thing. Yeah.
I love that. That is awesome information. I feel like we had the same mindset when I approached Tribe. I had a very similar mindset. In fact, I had to convince my husband that we weren't going to be on the street. He thankfully had a corporate job at the time as well, so we had a little comfort in that.
My husband went back to work.
Yeah,
he was a stay-at-home dad for us, and very successful for a long time before that. But when I decided to really do the startup thing, so I went into consulting. I never went to like, oh, I had this great, very comfortable, great, financial situation to nothing at all. It took me a little bit to get to that mindset of I'm going to be a startup CEO, but it did take, my husband making a change in his life too, in order to make that possible.
Yeah. So I think that what I really want to focus on is how did that come about? Did someone approach you? Did you join like an advisory board, or how did you get that opportunity?
Yeah, it's funny.
And only share what you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah,
obviously.
No, it's funny because you had asked me, or just to think about, who would I consider a mentor in my life as part of our conversation today. And the first person that comes to mind is actually a lady named Charla Triplett. And she was an advisor of mine all the way back when I was an undergrad in engineering. And she had spent most of her career in startups and in venture capital. And when I left Intuitive, pretty quickly after that, she called me and said, you should consider being a CEO for one of these startups that we really like, but need to have somebody that's had sales experience and could do it. She's like, I think you could do it. And at the time I was like, what? Like, I'm just getting
imposter syndrome.
There. Yeah, there's no way. But what I did, but at the same time, I started my own company, my consulting company, and really didn't know what I was doing yet. I just really was like, I'm going to do this. I know I have a lot to share, and I want to find startups I can work with and get to know that, that stage of business. And my first jump was actually into telehealth, and right in the pandemic. So telehealth software. And this was a, Series B stage company, maybe I think at the time it was like 120 people. Really, really enjoyed the team. And more so what I got to see is, okay, I understand the inner workings now of how a software company works. And also I started to see, okay, all this experience I have is great. I'm more ready than I thought.
Yes, I know. I honestly, anyone that's worked in Intuitive, I feel like they got an MBA. I mean, they really did. There's so much information that was given to us and that we were responsible for, and such a high ticket cost of the product in a disruptive market that I think, especially being there as long as you and I have been there, like we probably took for granted how much we acquired in education along that journey. You're just assuming that that's just common knowledge. Everyone has that approach to life and work. And I think what you're finding, post Intuitive is that gave you so much insight that you literally are at like a CEO level, like right out of the gate.
Yeah. No, and I didn't see that. Charla saw that, and she has along the way gotten me introduced to investors, and got even the show I just got on today at the very last minute. It was all through connections from her. So I'm very grateful to her for seeing something that I didn't necessarily see at the time, but see now. And like I said, I started at Intuitive when I was 26 years old. And at the time, I'd only had 1 year of experience doing anything else other than being in a lab in academia. So I didn't really know what I was capable of along the way. I just knew I was good at the jobs that I was given to do along the way, and had made an impact. But now, having the perspective that I do from the seat that I'm in now, it's like, Oh my gosh, yeah. You got like an advanced degree, which is funny enough. That's how I kind of sold my husband on here's what
Yeah.
I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
into startups. Like I'm just thinking I'm gonna give myself 2 years and think of it like I'm going back to school, but I'm going to
Yep.
startup school and I'm
Right.
I'm gonna hopefully come out of it. And we're right at the 2 years and so
Here you are.
things are
Well,
working.
okay, so let's talk about data biologics. First of all, I applaud you for taking the leap and taking wisdom of people before you. I think anyone that's listening that wants to take a leap, whether they start their own agency or they, go be a CEO in a startup, and if you're having those same self-doubts or questions on whether you're worthy or you qualify, if you trust in yourself and you've been successful at everything you've done in the past, history is going to repeat itself. And take both of our wisdom on that, go for it. What's the worst thing you can do? You can always go back to your corporate job, or you can always go back to a job. There will always be something for you to do, but you have to go for your dreams and try, or you'll regret it. And ultimately, all of that, like Leah had said earlier, is nonsense. None of it manifests, and
Yeah.
only if you allow it to. And so you just keep pressing on. So I really do want to talk about data biologics, especially now that we're potentially going to be working together through our process. But I want to understand from your perspective, and I hate the age-old question, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
But I think your company is fairly complex in the way you're approaching the market. So tell us what is unique to you. What is kind of the problem that you're trying to either lessen the burden of, eradicate altogether, or actually add a solution that's not out there right now?
Yeah, so there's kind of two sides to this like what's my motivation and all of it. And I'll start with just sort of like the fundamental, like what do? We collect patient reported outcomes and nuanced treatment and patient profile detail on treatments that today predominantly are experimental, kind of on the frontier. They're emerging. Things like platelet-rich plasma and bone marrow aspirate for osteoarthritis and different musculoskeletal conditions. But we also track other things that are even more on the front edge of things, like shockwave therapies and electromagnetic therapies and laser therapy. There's so many things that are available for patients today on the market, and they're paying cash for it. Yet there's a lot of misinformation, or there is just truly, of all the areas of medicine, and I've sold to every single surgical specialty that there is and have been part of this for a long time. Of all the areas of medicine, this is where you find the charlatans and the snake oil and the things that don't work. But at the same time, there are things that are working and have been working for a long time that have the potential to kind of offer a whole different way of approaching how you care for especially chronic pain conditions. Because today, people have nothing in between opioids and steroid injections and surgery. There's really nothing in between that. And there is a demand, no matter whether the medical community wants it to be there or not, there's a demand, and there's a reason why people spend cash. So the founders of DataBiologics are regenerative medicine physicians trained in physical medicine and rehab. And they are the pioneers of this space, been doing it for 20 years. If we think about the parallel to robotic surgery adoption, where this field is today is kind of like when I joined in 2009, when it was still, most hospitals didn't have a robot.
Everyone thought it was a marketing gimmick.
This is and it's just costing more money, and there's no value. So it's all the same kind of like sentiment that's there. So that's about where we are as a field in advancing these alternatives. But the problem is there isn't a player like Intuitive that has the incentive and the moat around technology that will push it forward. If today that the kind of industry that is around this space is not the ones producing the drug or the implant, they're just producing a way to take your blood out of your system and process it and put it back in. There's no you don't own your blood. You as the patient are the pharmacy. So I view it a little bit as an underdog story too. So for me, it had to have heart plus the like logical, like I'm going to help improve the field of medicine by making these outcomes more transparent and helping patients and doctors. So it's not just potentially clinicians that are the charlatans of the field. It's also the manufacturers, where, they don't know what they're going to get.
And it's also that market's not heavily regulated too, correct? Yeah.
And
so it's like the wild, wild west.
Exactly.
And so you trying to create any kind of uniformity within it, and also, give some kind of basis of clinical value, I think is a huge opportunity.
Yep. Right. That's exactly it. So there's really not anything comparable. I like to say, collecting patient data into electronic systems that's not new. That's like since, maybe not since the dawn of medicine, but certainly been around for a long time now. It's how we use that data and how it gets presented back, and in what channels, and how do we help first doctors assess which treatments are effective for what kind of patient, which products are actually delivering what they are selling you. So we are that kind of like, like the consumer reports for some of these products. But then on the flip side, for a patient, it's the same thing. Like if we know what you're experiencing, then we can find other patients in the data that look like you as a patient. And then we can present to you, here's the different things that patients have tried in your situation. And here's the likelihood of success based on what we know. And here's the physicians who are delivering this at a consistent level. So really breaking down the evidence into something that is consumable, not just, because today, electronic health record systems, there is a belief or maybe a perception that just because data is going in means there's value coming out. But who's getting the value from that? There's two reasons why you have EHRs in place. One is to comply with the federal requirement to create documentation that is stored in an electronic system. Two is to send the documentation to an insurance company in the correct structure so that you get reimbursed. That's the business of medicine. That's what EHRs are meant for. Or maybe sending your order, getting a prescription sent, scheduling appointments, those kinds of things. But there isn't a solution that is taking that data that's housed, the clinical data, the nuance about how treatment was delivered, and giving it back to the doctor and to the patient in a way that helps them make a decision and feel more confident about their decision. So that's what we're doing just on the technical side. But on the heart side of the company, one of our founders, Dr. Jerry Manga, he was just one of the most well-known voices in the field, president of the Interventional Orthobiologics Foundation, and really very, very passionate, published prolifically on all of this. And right as I was getting introduced to the company by Charla, who's kind of brought me along, she introduced me to the founders of DataBiologics. Dr. Manga suddenly, passed away very suddenly from cancer, and it was a shock to the community, shock to the founders, and I was just heartbroken for all of them at the time. But in that aftermath, they were collectively, Dr. Malanga's family, Luke, his son, is my chief operating officer, brilliant, just wonderful, wonderful guy. They decided, we want to do this. We want to bring this forward. We want to continue the mission. We want to see it come to its full potential. And that's when they reached out to me and asked if I would be their CEO and really taking this to the next level. But that presented a challenge, of course, challenge accepted, in that the company was not necessarily in a position to just, take off the ground. We had to build this as if it was from the start. So I had a foundation with a really fun database. I love working in the data, and a product, but we had to really build the model and come up with how we're going to approach,
how you're going to enter the market.
Yeah. And so that's that. And we're still on that journey now, but we're much, much farther along. It's gone from just me and Luke and our developer to we've got a full team of people now, and really got our processes in place. And just I couldn't be happier with how things have progressed in the last, just a little over a year since I came on as the full-time CEO.
I'm, for one, looking forward to seeing where you guys take this. And I think both of us have learned through all of our years in corporate that where you start isn't always where you end as far as what you had originally intended for a product. Sometimes you get pulled into a market that you didn't even have on your radar. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. But I think that giving patients more information to make informed decisions, and also even physicians, how they can steer conversations towards what's actually beneficial. The area that I personally like stands out to me right now that's total wild west is semaglutide, Ozempic, all the peptides, totally wild west. Anyone, it's like the previous years of Botox, that anyone could give Botox even if they weren't a doctor. And now I feel like any medical spa, any clinic, any, I think even I've seen a dentist that has Ozempic. So it'll be interesting to see. I had a former guest on that really kind of talked on the downside of that, and that's not really talked about. But it'll be interesting to see if you guys are in that space. I don't know. I mean, sometimes.
Well, so you're touching on exactly right. So the thing with drugs like that, right? When they're approved by the FDA, they're usually done with a very like narrowly framed clinical trial. It just has to be this way. Yes. But turns out it does other things too. And once it's approved, then doctors can use their medical judgment to use something off-label. And that can be, a positive for patients. But the problem is nobody's tracking that data anymore. Nobody's doing. So I'll put Ozempic on the platform all day long for other things. But the other thing doctors have to really consider when they are prescribing things and doing things off-label is the right level of consent with the patient. Understand this is an experimental application. It's not true. So they need to have that. And then if they do get confronted legally by, if somebody has a bad outcome, it's very important that physicians have data for themselves to show this is why I'm choosing to use it. The company is not going to foot the bill to do another trial unless there is an ROI in it. And it turns out they're already getting the ROI, right? Yeah. Everybody's on Ozempic.
Right. So, I know. Everyone's real thin, but I can't wait to see the downside of this. Like, this former guest of mine had talked about like there's significant muscle mass loss. And then that's obviously going to contribute to lower metabolism. And my whole degree and background is in nutrition. And so it's
stomach stop working apparently.
Yeah.
Right? Like
there's always a catch, right? I mean, everyone loves the immediate gratification of being skinny for the holidays or whatever, but there is always a catch. And I think what you're doing is trying to quantify the catch. So you're trying to say, what are the upsides? What is the clinical experience with this, whatever treatment? And then what are the quantified downsides? If there are at all any, maybe there are some that are bulletproof. I don't know, but that's interesting approach, and it'll be interesting to see how you guys take it.
The other thing I didn't mention really in this whole thing is what we track are patient-reported outcomes. And so in a lot of electronic records, it's more so about the diagnostics, like what was the blood, what were the labs, what was the vitals. Image, the vitals. You're not asking the patient a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later, like we do out to 5 years. First of all, like clinically validated surveys that can be published on, but also just their general experience. Were they satisfied with this treatment? Did it work for them?
Or did you gain all your weight back? For the example of this.
What were your side effects? We really talk a lot or ask a lot about, unexpected symptoms. And I find this to be really interesting in general. And it's always something when we were in robotics and working with the hospitals, like these readmissions. Oh, well, they were readmitted, but it was because they fell down the stairs and broke their leg. It wasn't because of the robotics.
Nothing to do with robotics. But they're under the DRG.
Yes. Yeah, they're under that global. But it's the same thing here where we ask patients these questions, and I see the data on the back end, and it's they report an infection, but you have to look at it closely, and it's like you had COVID. They said I had COVID, or I had this other thing happened, and so patients want to share about what's going on with them. But they don't always know that the question is trying to relate back to the treatment. It's really it's a Pandora box when it comes to things that happen that a patient feels are relevant to share back to their doctors.
What is, if you had to just say one thing that you didn't account for becoming a first-time CEO, but that you also learned through this last 2 years that you would love to share with aspiring CEOs or people that are maybe just embarking on your path, what would that be? What would the one that stood out to you the most?
Well, the whole thing has been just incredibly humbling.
Yeah.
I think even though you come into it with a confidence of, yeah, okay, I can do this, it's inevitably at least once a day, you're punched in the face, you're punched in the stomach.
Yeah.
So, and so I think it's, for me, it was always when I was in a very like well-funded position,
Yeah.
right?
Where
when
you
have
could fall and no one would
resources.
notice. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now I have a team, I have customers, I have all these other things. And I think it's challenged my perception of, I don't think worth is the right word, but it's close enough in that I always took such pride in, okay, in this level of perfection and level of capability. And when you're in a position as a startup CEO and everything is, you're doing all the jobs, and each one of them, like, if only I could just do just that, I would be so great at it.
You'd be in your zone of excellence.
Yeah, but it's not the case. So you end up, it's a balance. It's learning to really trust other people even more, and having like my team and really letting them see like the full human that I am. When I'm like, you guys, I'm burnt out at the end of the day, right? I don't have
or I don't know the answer to that,
or I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think those kinds of thoughts and acknowledgements were probably not something that weren't necessarily part of our culture anyways, but weren't necessarily something I felt like I even needed to get to. Yeah. And now I do. Now it's like, you have to be really real when you're in
you brought up something that I literally have on my to-do list of social media posts to do a post about this, but I think it's part of your humbling story. But when you go into business ownership or even leading a company like you are, if you carry with you your perfectionism bag, it immediately gets checked when you're not hitting revenue numbers. Because my former team, if anyone listens to this, thank you for listening if you do, but they all know I was a huge perfectionist, and they called me the pretty committee. Anytime they would put anything that was customer facing, they would send it to me first, and I would put it through the pretty committee, making sure that like it wasn't misspelled or it just was formatted correctly. And that worked probably in this zone of excellence, right? And it was necessary. But when you're trying to run a company and progress matters, the post is going to be perfectionism is the poison of progress. I think I said this in this last podcast, but you really get that served to you. I mean, if I had to answer the question I posed to you, it'd be, drop perfectionism. Good is good enough. Good is good enough. Yep. And honestly, even if you get it perfect, a year from now, you're going to want to change everything anyway. And so fixating on the meticulous points of something when it's good enough, to get you to that next stage is where most founders, CEOs, and executives have to turn their attention. And then, like you said, trust to delegate to those that are experts in their zone of excellence and kind of pull it all together. So you're like a quarterback now, right?
Yeah.
Don't you feel that way?
Yeah, that's funny. That was part of that article I wrote too, was this sort of like split between being like, when you're in this environment, like we were, you're either like this quarterback, but at the same time, you're kind of like a daughter. You're like both sides of it. And it can be a very confusing thing to be this, treated as a daughter, but also treated as a quarterback. You're like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think that you touched on something else in this perfectionist, challenge. The good enough is good enough, and not wanting to show, it's like you're not wanting to show a weakness to your team, but at the same time, and I learned this lesson over the last year too, is I've really brought together a bunch of very passionate people. But when you're a person that operates like I do, and I live in these these big ideas, and I kind of run very, very fast. When you don't slow down to kind of bring other people with you or open that door, they're not necessarily going to just give you what you need to hear. And
Yeah.
so I've definitely had to like make it known many, many times, but very much on our all hands call, like this, I need you guys to, you don't, nothing is stupid. Nothing
Yeah.
is below.
Yeah. Or don't be afraid to tell me I'm stupid. I just said
Yeah.
this
If
to
this
one of my
isn't
employees
good, tell
yesterday.
me.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of things are great ideas until they're
Yeah.
not. I said,
Yeah.
so you're never going to hurt my feelings. Tell me the truth. Like,
Yes.
does this suck? And she's like, yeah, it kind of sucks. I'm like, okay, then we're going to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Because I got 10 other ideas.
Yeah,
But yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's
So
that it's opening that door to that level of like just critique, and it just has changed everything by doing that and
yeah.
making it okay for the team and to come and with their ideas. And and sometimes it's things like our website, right? Like
Yeah.
to build a website, there's a lot of expense involved, but we didn't really
Mhm.
know what we wanted our like vision and brand. That's why I hope you were bringing you guys to the table to help us with that. But it was a good enough. It's good enough. We got to get something up there,
just got to be upright,
and just this so that we're here. But never did I finish it and say, oh, that's perfect and done.
So amazing. Yeah.
No, it was like just get us to the next step. And
going through experience, even if you thought it was perfect, a year from now or a year later, you'll hate it. I mean, that's just how it goes. Hopefully we'll build something that's more long-standing. But yeah, I started the exact same that you're just describing. I like wanted tribeagency.org to be this like incredible website and like my calling card. And I still really like it, but we've totally evolved. Like it's not what we had intended in the beginning. And I see this with every client we work with. We start with them really early, like in the pre-seed and seed environment. And so we're just helping them get to a point where they can get the money from the investors. And then knowing very well as we navigate through product development and product road mapping and market research and like the original beta sites for these accounts or clients, that so much is going to come of that. And then it's going to evolve. So I don't feel like you have to have everything figured out. You just have to have it figured out for right now.
Yeah. Good enough is good enough.
Good enough. Exactly. And seen.
Yeah. Well,
okay,
there's the other piece.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say,
go ahead.
Trying to be, and you probably worked with a lot of companies, like last year was maybe, at least what I've heard, is the hardest year on record to try to raise funds as a tech company. Like couldn't have been a worse time for me to try to do that. But I think the silver lining in that is that I had to really, really bootstrap the company, and every single thing like was a decision to be made. Did I want to hire a web developer? Of course. Did I want to hire like all these pay for these special things? Of course. But that wasn't an option in order to just live to fight another day.
Yes.
So just to keep going. So I think the lessons learned from last year in gone are the days of this is a great idea and it's going to get funded. There's so much more that you got to bring to the table now. So it's the overall experience trying to raise in the worst environment ever to raise, I think just made us stronger, made me stronger, faster than it maybe would have otherwise.
I mean, we could talk about this forever because exactly what you're describing is the same journey I've been on for the last year. And I think I'll end it. But just, you brought up another point that's like an intuitivism, but it's like sometimes, and I've seen this with my clients, sometimes it actually is beneficial to slow down, to speed up. Right. And people don't want to slow down to speed up because they want to speed up. But sometimes people are skipping ahead in areas where they really shouldn't. And as painful as it is to not have that revenue goal met for the board or, not hit the milestone that you had put out, if it pays to take a step back, or what I call zoom out, and really focus on whatever it is that's getting in your way, that'll essentially get in the way of scale, then I always say it is good to pull back, right?
Yeah.
So a book that you would recommend to aspiring leaders or even CEOs of startups or medtech companies that's made an impact on you, even if it's a
Yeah.
oldie but goodie? What's the one
Oh
book?
gosh, I have a lot of books that I like. I read constantly. But The Big Leap, that's one. He has another book called Zone of Genius, but I read The Big Leap first. Um, Another one that I really got a lot out of, especially in the time of hard to raise money as a startup, was a book called The Minimalist Entrepreneur.
Mm.
And I think the author was the CEO of a oh, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's similar to like a Canva type
Okay.
application.
Yeah.
Um, but really gave me like some good, framework of no, you don't need to have multiple millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to be
Yep.
successful as an entrepreneur. So I did like I like that one. There's another one that's maybe a little bit more on the heart side of it, the soul
Mhm.
sourced entrepreneur. I did like I like things that sort of combine, your inner journey, your ability to sort of like connect into your true self, and then the logistics of actually
Right.
running a
Like the
business and like,
tactical.
yeah,
Yes.
the tactical things
Yeah.
uh, being successful in that. Most recently, I read a book that I'm really got excited about called Play Bigger. So in the entrepreneurial, like tech, just startup space,
Hmm.
and kind of the bigger idea of category design and what that means and how founders should really be thinking about that. Another one, if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, would be one, Super Founders. This is a book that had a lot of evidence behind, analyzing what makes for a successful founder and what are like what's
Oh,
the recipe that needs to be there for, by analyzing all of these different startups. So, I like the data and I like
good
I
to
like
know.
numbers. So
All right.
that's my short list. I've got,
Okay.
if
Yeah,
people want to reach out for more, I've got lots.
I'm a book fan too. I mean, sadly, when you're running a company, it's not a lot of time for books. I do more podcasts these days than books, but I'm staring at two full bookshelves
Oh,
of
I listen
books.
to everything now. I don't
Yeah.
have time. My eyes are just done.
Last thing. So, what's your superpower?
Oh my gosh. Um, my superpower is I have an ability to assemble a lot of complex topics and then communicate that in a simple way to people. I think that is my superpower.
Okay. I think that's probably aligned with your writing skills, right?
Yeah, yeah. Especially if I can write it. Speaking sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of all over, but if I can write when I write, yeah, it just takes over. I can write very fluidly, and that's something I get very excited about, is
Yeah.
pulling together all of these sometimes things that don't seem to relate at all, and I can find the way that they connect and help people see that.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you, one, for being on this podcast today. I'm sorry we couldn't do it on the original platform, but we may do. And
You bet.
then also, I can't wait to work with you for DataBiologics and watch that company flourish and see where we take the brand. I'm super
Yeah,
excited about
I'm
that.
excited too. Well, thanks for having me on. This is great. I think timing's perfect. I love to get on and talk all things in the space, but just definitely,
Yeah.
hearing your story and connecting with, how we've kind of taken parallel paths following our time.
It's fun. Don't you think
Exciting.
it's fun? I mean,
Yeah.
I have fun every day. And actually the nice thing about actually being a business owner where I'm not answering to anyone, if I'm not having fun, I stop doing it. And that is the luxury. That is the number one
Yeah.
luxury of being a founder, is that if I don't enjoy it or it's not making me an exceptional amount of money in exchange for enjoyment, I just stop doing it. Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
that easy.
Yeah. There is something to that. It's like there's this like equal like, feeling of total freedom
Yeah.
with also far more responsibility than you ever
Yes.
wanted
Yes.
thought you
It's
would have.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yes. But you wouldn't have it any other way. So
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you for doing
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.